Добрый день, глубоко уважаемые коллеги и гости.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. It's the 16th of September. We are beginning the session of the Dissertation Council for the defense of the dissertation by Eduard Oparin. The dissertation is submitted in conformity with the requirements for the academic degree of the candidate of economic sciences. The topic of the dissertation is formation of a mechanism for increasing the competitiveness of private medical clinics in the context of reforming the healthcare system in Russia. Under the order issued by the Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg State University, I, Professor Marina Latucha, Doctor of Economic Sciences, St. Petersburg State University, have been appointed the Chairperson of the Dissertation Council. The other members of the Dissertation Council have been appointed by the same order. They are Professor Igor Akulin, Doctor of Medical Sciences, St. Petersburg State University. Some members of the Dissertation Council are participating in this session remotely. They are Professor Yelena Rogova, Doctor of Economic Sciences, High School of Economics, Professor Nikolai Dimitriadi, Doctor of Economic Sciences, Rostov State Economic University, Professor Marina Sherisheva, Doctor of Economic Sciences, Moscow State University. Dear colleagues, can you hear us and see us? Yes. The answer is positive. Professor Svetla Trifonova-Marinova, Doctor of Aalborg University, Denmark. Can you hear us and see us? The answer is positive. The degree seeker is Eduard Oparin. The research advisor, Doctor of Economic Sciences, Professor of St. Petersburg State University, Andrei Panibratov, is also here. I would like to ask the members of the Dissertation Council who are participating in this session remotely to switch off their microphones. Please don't forget to make sure that your microphone is switched on when you are given the floor. The session of the Dissertation Council is being recorded and broadcast on the official website of St. Petersburg State and it is also being interpreted from Russian into English and from English into Russian. You can ask your questions and make comments about the dissertation using the email address that you can find on the official website of St. Petersburg State University. This will allow you to participate in the academic discussion. The technical personnel will refer the questions to me and I will read them out during the discussion. The questions are supposed to be relevant to the contents of the dissertation. The authors of the questions are to write down their name, position and workplace. The questions that are not relevant to the contents of the dissertation and anonymous questions will not be read out. Under the relevant order issued by St. Petersburg State University, hereinafter referred to as the order, the session of the Dissertation Council is duly constituted, provided at least 2/3 of the members of the Dissertation Council are present. The total number is not to be fewer than 4 people. The Dissertation Council consists of 6 people, 6 of which are present. Therefore, we have a quorum. I would like to ask the representative of the Department for Dissertation Council Management to make an attendance list. The agenda is as follows. It will last for about 2 hours. Number 1, the chairman's presentation about the documents submitted by the academic degree seeker and their conformity with the requirements. The chairman's reply to questions, if any. Number 2, the degree seeker's presentation providing an overview and findings of the research, about 15 minutes. Questions to the degree seeker regarding the presentation. Replies to the questions. Next, reports on the dissertation including external reports, if any. Then the council members will be taking the floor in turns in order to read out their reports. The chairman's report on the dissertation, the academic degree seeker's comments about the reports on the dissertation, no more than 20 minutes, and open discussion. The floor will be given to the members of the audience. They can give a brief account of their ideas or ask questions about the research. No more than 2 minutes per person. It is necessary to fill in the registration form and give their full name before the talk. Please also give your position and workplace. The chairperson will read out the questions received by email. Please note that questions which take more than 2 minutes to read will not be read out. Replies to the questions. Presentation of the dissertation supervisor. Deliberations of the members of the dissertation council before the open balloting on conferring or not conferring the academic degree. Open balloting, vote counting and recording of the results in the protocol. Making a decision on whether to confer or not the academic degree. The academic degree seeker's closing speech. Dear colleagues, do you have any questions or objections to the agenda? There are no objections, therefore I would like to proceed with the agenda. Please leave your telephones set on the silent mode. This will allow you to contact you if a technical failure occurs. The dissertation by Valerievich Oparin is submitted in conformity with the requirements for the academic degree of the candidate of economic sciences, scientific specialty 526 management. The topic of the dissertation is formation of a mechanism for increasing the competitiveness of private medical clinics in the context of reforming the healthcare system in Russia. The dissertation was approved for the defense by the order of the Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg State University. The dissertation was completed in St. Petersburg State University. The research advisor is Professor of St. Petersburg State University, Andrei Panibratov. The academic degree seeker has published 3 papers, including 2 papers published in peer-reviewed journals recommended by the Ministry of Education and Science, and 1 paper has been published in the journals indexed by Web of Science or Scopus. The degree seeker has submitted a full set of documents to the Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg State University. The representative of the Department for Dissertation Council Management has the copies of the documents. Before giving the floor to the degree seeker, I would like to ask the members of the Dissertation Council if they have any questions to the academic degree seeker, and if it is necessary to read out the documents. No questions, no questions, there are no questions. Now let us proceed with the agenda. The floor is yours. You have 15 minutes.
Thank you very much. Dear Chairman and members of the Dissertation Council, the dissertation work formation of a mechanism for increasing the competitiveness of private medical clinics in the context of reforming the healthcare system in Russia is submitted for your consideration. The relevance of the research topic is determined by the following main reasons. In recent years, countries have faced a number of global challenges: economic slowdown, increased political and economical instability, an increase in the number of pensioners, and decrease in the working population, the emergence of a burden of chronic diseases due to the aging of nations. The coronavirus pandemic has hit national health systems around the world, highlighting their shortcoming and the need to rebuild them to be resilient to possible next pandemics. The national project Healthcare being implemented in Russia, the state program Health Development and the tasks announced by the President of Russian Federation in his address to the Federal Assembly set the task of increasing the life expectancy, reducing the mortality rate of the able-bodied population, and increasing the proportion of population satisfied with the quality of medical care. For this, it is planned to improve the provision of medical care with an emphasis on the formation of a healthy lifestyle, accelerated development of implementation of innovative methods of diagnostics and treatment, and other important aspects. For healthcare, this means an urgent need to increase the work with the private sector and build the capacity to better managing of a mixed system in which public and private health organizations would make an effective contribution to achieving national goals for universal health coverage. Against this background, solving the problem of increasing the competitiveness of medical institutions and the quality of medical services becomes the main task of the private healthcare system in Russia. The purpose of the dissertation research is to develop theoretical and methodological approaches to the formation of a mechanism for increasing the competitiveness of private healthcare organizations as business entities in the medical services market. To achieve the goal, in the dissertation research, the following tasks were set and solved: exploring the theoretical and methodological aspects of the competition, analyzing the features of the formation of competitive advantage of healthcare organizations, analyzing and generalizing modern approaches of assessing competitiveness, studying the experience of healthcare organizations in foreign countries, analyzing the main problems of healthcare system in Russia, identifying factors that form competitive advantages, analyzing competitive strategies of private medical clinics, unleashing the role and potential of digital technologies, developing a methodology for assessing the competitiveness, and finally developing proposals for the formation of mechanism for increasing the competitiveness of private healthcare organizations. The achieved results of the study consist of the development and adding of the existing theoretical, methodological, and scientifically applied approaches to the formation of a mechanism for increasing the competitiveness of private medicine organizations. The main results of the dissertation research, which have significant scientific novelty, are presented here. An analysis of the theoretical foundations of competition and competitive advantages of the healthcare sector showed that in order to explain the emergence of competitive advantages in medical clinics, an approach of a synthesis of the concept of dynamic capabilities and the theory of value creation, which complement and enrich each other, is currently being formed. From the point of view of value creation theory, competitiveness of healthcare is based on the involvement of patient in the value creation process. The concept of dynamic capabilities provides a new mechanism for competitive advantages, introduces a dynamic orientation into the theory of competitiveness, which is characteristics of innovative economy. The practical significance determined by the possibility of using the ASAS methodology for assessing the competitiveness of private medical clinics and using the developed recommendations in the formation of mechanisms for increasing the competitiveness of private healthcare organizations is presented here. In the present work, the features of the formation of the competitive advantages of medical organizations in the paid medical services market in modern conditions arising from the characteristics of healthcare sector and differences in medical services are analyzed and determined. The quality of the healthcare system is largely correlated with the level of economic development of the country and the level of public spending on healthcare in general. The difference between the private and public healthcare sectors depends more on the structure and maturity of the market than on the form of ownership. Market structure is a key factor in the efficiency of healthcare system as both public and private monopolies, which can lead to inefficiencies. An analysis of existing approaches to assessing the competitiveness in the healthcare sector revealed that the most of the methods are theoretical studies due to attempt to take into account the whole variety of factors in the competitiveness of healthcare organizations, which makes their experimental verification difficult and limits their applicability in practice. An analysis of the experience of healthcare organizations in foreign countries has shown that in all modern healthcare system, medical care is provided in strictly regulated markets with various combinations of the public and private sectors, which is due to the presence of such characteristics in the healthcare sector that violate the principles of an ideal market. In world practice, the competitive strategies of medical clinics are formed under the influence of the number of external factors presented here. In the context of the pandemic, the main types of strategies for foreign clinics have become strategies aimed at accelerating digitalization, solving the problem of a shortage of medical personnel, improving supply chains, and changing payment systems for medical services. In recent years, Russia has taken measures to increase the availability and improve the quality of medical care. However, a comparative analysis of the effectiveness of healthcare systems in Russia and foreign countries has shown that the state healthcare system doesn't cope with its tasks, as is evidenced by several indicators. First, on this slide, by the indicator of the provision of the country's population with medical care services. Second, by low public health spendings, shown on this slide. Third, by high share of private spending in the structure of total healthcare spending and high personal spending on healthcare, shown on this slide. And finally, by the resulting healthcare system performance indicators, life expectancy, which is below the world average, and high levels of morbidity and mortality per 1,000 population, shown on this slide. In Russia, as in other countries, paid medical services are provided by private, state, and departmental medical institutions. The main difference between public and private clinics is that public clinics tend to operate under soft budget constraints, while private clinics, unlike public ones, under the pressure of competition, are forced to optimize their activities and increase efficiency. The involvement of the private sector in the provision of health services creates competitive pressure on public sector, which can lead to more efficient social production in the whole. However, in countries with low per capita income and insufficient healthcare system, in the absence of clear public policies, the private sector operates in isolation from the public sector, which is strong profit orientation. The reasons for weak integration of the private medicine sector into the unified national healthcare system in Russia are shown on this slide. Strengthening the competitive position of private clinics can be facilitated by the development of highly specialized areas in the expansion of diagnostic capabilities, introduction of innovative diagnostic and treatment technologies, improving the qualifications of medical personnel, development of the service component, personalization of medical treatment and services, and organization of convenient remote services. The main factors that determine the competitive strategy of private clinics are shown on this slide. And here we see that the number one factor is increased competition for medical personnel. Number two is strengthening the competitive position of public medical institutions. Three, growth of market concentration and consolidation of network clinics. And the fourth, integration of private clinics into unified national healthcare system. The Russian market. Based on the analysis of the strategies of private medical clinics, the following types of strategies that can potentially increase the competitiveness and retain the competitive advantages of medical clinics are identified and summarized here. The Russian market of private medicine is characterized by high opacity, distortion of information, concealment of real indicators provided by clinics, which makes it difficult to measure and compare a large number of factors that determine competitiveness, specific characteristics of the medical services, market, and environmental factors. To assess the competitiveness of private medical clinics in the context of limited opportunities to obtain reliable information about medical institutions, the author has proposed a method in which the competitiveness of medical clinics is determined by an algorithm and formula presented here. The assessment of competitiveness was carried out on the basis of the largest multidisciplinary clinics in the Russian Federation, based on the results of 2017 and 2019. The application of the author's approach made it possible to assess the competitive situation in the paid medical services market more objectively and identify MedC Group as potential industry leader already in 2017, when Mother and Child Group was still the leader in revenue at that time. The developed approach to assessing the competitiveness of medical clinics has a practical focus and can be used both in scientific research and by the management of medical clinics to assess the competitiveness of their companies and analyze competition in the paid medical services market. Empirical verification of the author's methodology showed an advantage in the form of the possibility to predict changes in the competitive position in the studied clinics. Based on the results of the research, the author identified the key sources of increasing the competitiveness of private multidisciplinary clinics shown on this slide and the next. As a proposal for the formation of a mechanism for increasing the competitiveness of private healthcare organizations, the sequence of 4 main stages of building a complex of 9 competitive advantages with their 31 components was developed, which is visualized by the represented rocket model. One of the key sources of increasing the competitiveness of medical clinics is the introduction of digital technologies. The author highlights the main areas of digital transformation of medical services that have the potential for development and application of private medicine. Successful implementation of digital technologies is impossible without changing of existing business processes and, more importantly, a fundamental change in the approach to organizing medical care. Telemedicine technologies increases the efficiency of organizing the work of medical staff. It can dramatically improve access to medical services, especially for people in remote rural areas, improve the quality of medical services and the efficiency of the medical clinic in the whole, and consequently increase its competitiveness. The author proposes an algorithm for the implementation of telemedicine technologies in private clinics, the stages of which are shown here on slide 24. A significant part of Russian population lives in small towns, located at long distances from large centers. About 26% of population lives in rural areas and often doesn't have access to even basic medical care. It is not economically feasible for private clinics to open high-tech medical centers in small towns. In order to successfully introduce the latest medical technologies, increase the efficiency and effectiveness of medical clinics, enter new markets less costly and expand the patient base and consequently to increase competitiveness, the author proposes to develop a clinic infrastructure according to the hub-and-spoke scheme. The hub clinic centralizes medical services that require the use of the latest and the most excessive high technologies, as well as all management functions. The characteristics of the elements of the organizational structure hub and spoke of a private multidisciplinary clinics recommended in the work are summarized in the presented table here on this slide. The developed methods, practical recommendations, and conclusions are aimed to help in solving the existing problem of developing theoretical and methodological approaches to the formation of a mechanism for increasing the competitiveness of private healthcare enterprises as business entities. The results of the research and recommendations are intended for leaders and senior managers of medical clinics in the private healthcare sector. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, do you have any questions about the presentation? There are no questions. Let us proceed with the agenda. They will read out their reports. The academic degree seeker may answer the questions after each report is read out, or you can answer the questions after each report. I would like to ask the members of the Dissertation Council to read out their reports. And after that, Mr. Oparin will answer all the questions. There are no external reviews. All the reports are published on the official website of St. Petersburg State University. Therefore, I would like to ask you to read out only the questions and critical remarks. Do you have any objections to this? There are no objections. Now, let us proceed with the agenda. I give the floor to Professor Akulin. I would like to say that this is a really relevant dissertation because the development of paid medical services and its incorporation in the national medical system is a very challenging issue, and it needs further consideration. Moreover, the national health system includes, among other things, private sector should work according to single standards. While I was reading the dissertation, I realized that it provides some useful recommendations and guidelines. This is theoretical work, however, it has a number of useful and practical recommendations. There are some debatable issues in my dissertation. I suppose you have read them out. I don't believe that private medicine is not going to develop within the framework of public contracts. Moreover, I don't see how this can develop further under current challenging conditions. It's a debatable issue. But I would like to emphasize that this is a debatable issue. I used to work in the system of compulsory medical insurance, and unfortunately our expectations were not met. So my experience shows that there are many challenges in the system. Although private clinics were also involved in the compulsory medical insurance. However, this is a debatable issue. The purpose of the dissertation is to develop assessment of competition of private medical clinics. The dissertation, I believe, has interesting insights. The research findings are very well written in the dissertation. I do not have any major remarks. However, I suppose you did need to include footnotes in the dissertation, since you have a reference list in the dissertation. I also asked you about personal care, medical service, personal service and personalized service. So what's the difference between these terms? However, this minor remark does not change the overall positive assessment of the dissertation. I suppose you will have something to say about it. Well, this is a debatable issue. Anyway, I also have some questions. Do you believe it is possible for private medical clinics to compete with private, or rather with state-run clinics when it comes to public contract? And what are the conditions? Number two, what priorities in the state medical system can be interesting for the private medical system? Is it possible to compete among state-run hospitals without the participation, without the involvement of private medical clinics? What guidelines can be used for public healthcare system? Do you believe that the existing system of paid medical services are relevant to Russian citizens? And what's your forecast for the near future? What should be done to make this system more effective? And I would like you to tell me about the practical significance of your dissertation. Are there any medical clinics that have used your method of assessment, and what's your attitude to your methodology? So, I suppose that the dissertation, formation of a mechanism for increasing the competitiveness of private medical clinics in the context of reforming the healthcare system in Russia, is a complete research paper. It makes an important contribution to science, namely developing a mechanism for increasing the competitiveness of private medical clinics. The dissertation by Eduard Oparin, Formation of a Mechanism for Increasing the Competitiveness of Private Medical Clinics in the Context of Reforming the Healthcare System, complies with the major requirements set forth in order as of the 19th of 2021 on the procedure of granting academic degree at St. Petersburg State University, and Eduard Oparin can be awarded the academic degree of the candidate of economic sciences. The specialty is 526 management. Thank you. Thank you very much for your report and for your critical remarks. Now I give the floor to Professor Dimitriadi. Dear colleagues, good afternoon. I would like to say that the dissertation deals with a very relevant topic. I have seen how private medical clinics try to enter the market in late 80s. And I can see that very few medical clinics, private medical clinics, survived for various reasons. I mean, very few private medical clinics survived without involvement in state healthcare. It's impossible to provide many services, a wide range of services within the framework of a private clinic. You need very expensive laboratory equipment. You need an intensive care unit and so on. Then the situation changed, and I saw that private medical clinics mostly now focus on outpatient treatment, also on dentistry and cosmetology. Now the situation is changing. We're seeing large investors coming, and big chains are being opened. As far as I know, even a chain of oncological clinics is going to be opened, and we know that it requires lots of investment. I suppose that this dissertation is very relevant, is very up to date. Now we are seeing new stages. We see an increased participation of private medical clinics in competition. They can compete only in very specific shares of market. However, this is a very good momentum. So all that said, I suppose the dissertation is very important, and it makes a very important and useful contribution to science. It important information and also develops measures to assess and to increase the competitiveness of private medical clinics. After reading the dissertation, I wrote several questions. I also paid attention to the term personal health care. I came across this term a few years ago, but the situation there was very different. A very well-to-do person came up to me and asked me to help him to open a private clinic for his family. But in other cases, we are talking about maybe personalized healthcare, not about personal healthcare. I also have a question about scientific novelty. On page 10, you write about factors of competition, and he gives a list of these factors. I suppose you could have used the term characteristics of competitive environment. I suppose factors of competitiveness has a different meaning. And also the dissertation has some misprints and inaccuracies, although the author was working on the stylistics of the text very well. There are no distortions in the dissertation. However, there are some inaccuracies in the dissertation. However, this does not change the overall positive assessment of the dissertation. And in general, I would like to say that the dissertation by Eduard Oparin complies with the major requirements set forth in order on the procedure of granting academic degrees at St. Petersburg State University, and Eduard Oparin can be awarded the academic degree of the candidate of economic sciences, scientific specialty 5 to 6 management. The dissertation is compliant with sections 9 and 11 of the above mentioned order. Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments. Now I give the floor to Professor Rogova. The floor is yours. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I would like to emphasize that the dissertation is relevant. We see a rapid development of digital technology, including telemedicine, and the guidelines from the dissertation which concern digitalization are very important, and they even can be regarded as a plan of action. Therefore, the dissertation has practical significance. Right now we are developing a project for state-run clinics, so this dissertation is very up-to-date. I would like to say that the research findings are credible. The author has studied different database. He also draws upon experience of foreign medical clinics. And I also suppose that the author has published a number of papers on the topic of the dissertation. So the validity of the research findings is without any doubt. It also has a scientific novelty. I also suppose that the section which assesses competitiveness of private medical clinics is also very important and very useful, since it allows us to give an objective assessment on the market of paid medical services. I would like to say that private medical clinics may compete with different clinics. And we are seeing big changes on the market right now. However, there are some debatable issues I would like to focus on. Let me read them out. While describing the approaches to analyzing the efficiency of medical clinics, the author uses Northern Complan indicators. However, the author says that it is important to use different factors, and it is quite challenging to use the Northern Complan indicators in practice. The approaches that we see in literature are usually based on data development analysis. They allow to identify the efficiency of medical clinics because they deal with performance. So I suppose you could continue research in this area. The dissertation has identified the main sources of increasing competitiveness of private medical clinics. However, the author doesn't say how he came to the conclusion, how he identified these major factors. He didn't show us the algorithm of identifying these factors. Therefore, it's impossible to decide if these are the factors that should be taken into account by managers. We have seen survey results on the slide, but we don't know the algorithm of this survey, so I would like to clarify on this point. The same refers to identifying strategies of private medical organizations. How did you identify these strategies? You didn't write anything about the method of identification of strategies. And some strategies are very similar. So I suppose this also requires further elaboration. You describe the mechanism of increasing competitiveness of private medical clinics. However, you do not say anything about the economic efficiency of private medical clinics. This issue also requires further elaboration. And the dissertation provides a layout which describes the sources of competitiveness. You mentioned that some of the stages can be implemented simultaneously. So please provide elaboration of this issue. The critical remarks do not change the overall positive assessment of the dissertation. These are rather recommendations. The dissertation by Eduard Oparin is a complete research work. It solves the issue of developing a mechanism for increasing the competitiveness of private medical clinics, and the dissertation by Eduard Oparin complies with the major requirements set forth in the relevant order of St. Petersburg State University, and Eduard Oparin can be awarded the academic degree of the candidate of Economic Sciences, Scientific Specialty 526 Management. Thank you very much for your report. Now I give the floor to Professor Cheryshev. Dear Chairperson, dear colleagues, thank you for giving me an opportunity to read this dissertation. I believe it's very interesting. More than 5 years ago, I worked as a marketing director in healthcare. And I suppose that consumers have their own opinion on medical services. I suppose that medical services should be personalized. They cannot be personal, but they should be personalized. I also worked with different medical organizations, and a postgraduate student of mine also wrote a dissertation about the marketing of medical institutions. So it was very interesting for me to read this dissertation. I believe that the relevance of the dissertation is without any doubt. Now a few words about the dissertation itself. It's a very balanced work. It has theoretical foundations and practical guidelines which can be used by private medical clinics. The author looked at the evolution of assessment of efficiency in healthcare. Healthcare provides very specific services. They should be customer-oriented, unlike many other services. They should meet the demands of the consumer, and the consumer should get an opportunity to increase or to improve or at least to maintain their health. Private medical clinics compete for patients on the market, and unfortunately there is unfair competition, and the analysis of competitiveness in the sector of paid medical services is a very interesting section of the dissertation. The methods which assessed competitiveness of private medical clinics is also very interesting and very important. I read the dissertation and I read the papers written by Eduard Oparin. I suppose that the research findings are credible. The author has made presentations at international conferences, which is also very important. This allows us to say that the research findings are credible and valid. However, I have some questions about the dissertation. My questions are as follows. I suppose that one issue requires further consideration. You describe marketing strategy of a medical clinic from a commercial aspect. However, service is a specific medical service is a specific service. When marketing strategy is regarded without taking into account the specificity of the medical services, you exclude very important issues from the analysis, such as co-creation of value. The patient in this case is involved in medical in healthcare system, as patients should follow the doctor's recommendations. Therefore, I suppose you should have a different understanding of the marketing strategy, and you should take into account the all the stakeholders. So I hope you would clarify why you regard the marketing strategy from the point of view of the functional approach. You also talk about public-private partnership in the dissertation. And you talk about different types of public-private partnership: joint venture, concession, outsourcing, alternative projects, and cooperation in the area of hemodialysis. I suppose that cooperation in treatment of hemodialysis is sort of standing apart. And I also wanted to ask you about the alternative project. Is it the fifth type of public-private partnerships? And are these public-private partnership types homogeneous or heterogeneous groups? I also have another question. I would like to ask you as an expert in the area. Is it possible to use the mechanism that you develop for the work of state medical clinics? And can you identify the elements which are key for any medical clinic, both private medical clinics and state medical clinics? And can you identify the elements that can be used or adapted for the use in state medical clinics? The questions and critical remarks do not change the overall positive assessment of the dissertation. The dissertation makes contribution to the scientific discourse. So my overall opinion is as follows. The dissertation by Eduard Oparin, formation of a mechanism for increasing the competitiveness of private medical clinics in the context of reforming the healthcare system in Russia, complies with the major requirements set forth in the relevant order of St. Petersburg State University, and Eduard Oparin can be awarded the academic degree of the candidate of economic sciences, scientific specialty 526, management. Thank you very much for your report. Now I give the floor to Professor Marinova. The floor is yours.
Дорогие коллеги, я прочитаю.
Dear colleagues, I will.
Okay. I will read my assessment, and I will refer to my assessment in English. If you would excuse me about it. Right. First of all, I'm very grateful to be part of this defense, and I would structure my assessment in terms of conceptual clarity, structural clarity, processual, and then I would refer to the mechanism. So the presented dissertation addresses a very important problem for any type of organization, which is its competitiveness, but more so for non-business-oriented organizations, so non-for-profit organizations usually. The research problem is even more challenging as it explores the competitive positioning of private medical organizations who strive to deliver medical services and therefore respond to a key societal need related to providing medical care. Now, the root of the problem is in the conceptual understanding of the nature of healthcare. In other words, is it a private good or is it a public good? Or perhaps it can be both. And subsequently, this leads to issues related to the ways in which healthcare should be funded, managed, and how health providers actually can position themselves. So the problem is further complicated by the contextual embeddedness of healthcare. So there are a number of national systems of healthcare, but the question is whether these other national systems and these other types of organizations of healthcare actually apply to a specific contextually embedded system of healthcare. And that makes many comparisons of healthcare systems either misleading or even pointless as their fundamental presumption, in other words, about the nature of healthcare, because the understanding of the nature of healthcare is actually rather diverse and contextually defined. So this is my point one. Then I move on to the other point, which is about the competitive positioning. And indeed, it is a very interesting construct because competitive positioning, if we use the key strategies, they're cost leadership, differentiation, focus differentiation, and focus cost. So in the thesis, Eduard Oparin actually refers to the need for private medical providers in Russia to offer differentiated services and therefore have a differentiated competitive position. I would argue that, and I want to hear his opinion on whether their positioning should not be focus differentiation, which is related to providing a more personalized medical service with a greater specialization and therefore supported by infrastructure that guarantees the delivery of specialization. Another key point that I raise in my assessment is the point about healthcare services and whether they actually are associated with, as one of my colleagues said, value creation or value co-creation. And in that sense, yes, it is important to have the resource-based view in terms of resources, having the real resources. But would the author actually argue that the service dominant logic might be highly appropriate in reflecting on the competitiveness of private medical service providers? So this is also related to the fact that when we use the resource-based view or the transaction orientation explanation of services, we speak about demand, buyers, customers, consumers. So this is all about exchange. While in the medical system, we speak about patient, user, recipient of healthcare. And these are more fine-grained lines that lead to valuable reflections with implications going far beyond the private medical organizations. The author provides examples of indicators developed by other scholars and develops their application. His findings are interesting and valuable and have academic rigor. Nevertheless, I would be interested to know if these indicators are sort of ready-made and fully applicable to the Russian private medical organizations, and if there are any other specific indicators that might reflect the contextual specificity and the nature, needs, wants, and preferences of Russian consumers that, in my view, should have some specificity. I think that Eduard Oparin demonstrates a good understanding of extant literature with reference to a number of authors and diverse medical systems, providing numerous examples of US, British, Chinese, Indian, European, and Australian ones. I have not been able to understand to what extent these examples are relevant to the Russian context, considering the fundamental question I asked. However, the author uses a lot of data from reputable sources, and I wonder whether these data have been compared with Russian sources on investment in health service, because sometimes we can observe differences in the data provided by transnational organizations and national organizations. So these are some of the fundamental conceptual issues about positioning and how it affects actually the value proposition based on this focus differentiation, in my view, and therefore how it would affect the role of private medical services, providing personalized, at the point of need, service, and possibly service that can improve the well-being of the workforce in the Russian Federation, and therefore increase the life expectancy in the long run. Then I'll focus on the structure, and I've made the comment that the PhD thesis is structured well. It has a substantive literature review and theoretical background. It has a methodological section, and it has an analytical section. In addition, the PhD is supported by the 3 publications which read very well, and they have a contribution. There are very good sections on healthcare innovation, digitalization, and an analysis of the factors that hamper the promotion of these in the Russian healthcare system. Here, the contextual specificity is very well explained, but I want to raise 2 issues here. One is, as the author promotes digitalization and its use and its adoption by private medical clinics, which I think for the country like Russia, with its huge territory, is highly appropriate. However, there are 2 issues. Would private medical clinics have the digital infrastructure in order to secure the market penetration and therefore the diffusion of these services so that they are not concentrated in a couple or several big cities, but actually they can have a high impact across the country. I think that Eduard Oparin has not overlooked the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on the medical service provision and the changes it has triggered in terms of face-to-face and digital provision, type of services sought out by patients, and the effects on saving lives and on profitability of medical provision in general. So I wonder to what extent actually private medical provision has managed to compensate for the inefficiencies of the state services. In other words, how it has optimized its services in order to compensate for the marketing efficiencies in view of the COVID-19 pandemic. I think that all the presentations in the thesis feeds very well into the suggestions and discussions in Chapter 3 on the development of a mechanism of increasing the competitiveness of private medical clinics, with a special attention to strategies for embedding them in integrated business groups or by creating new business groups, which can increase not only their scope and reach, but also make them more competitive, reliable, trustworthy, and increase their bargaining power vis-à-vis the state provision of healthcare. However, when we speak about the mechanism and the indicators used, the author mentioned also in the thesis, but also in the presentation, that he provides an objective measure. And I wonder what is the relationship between objective and subjective, because many of the indicators are actually perceptual. In other words, they're subjective. So therefore, how this subjectivity in the indicators affects the objectivity or the objectiveness of the overall measure. I think that in terms of novelty, the PhD offers certain novel issues, and I believe that the author develops suggestions on tools for increasing the competitiveness of private medical clinics in Russia, which might be quite helpful. I particularly like the systematized rocket model he suggests, and I think it can be used not only by private medical providers, but also by state-owned medical providers. And of course, the input can be somewhat different. The author has shown evidence of scholarly publications on the topic of his PhD thesis that demonstrate his academic ability to reach out to a wider audience beyond the management of a single private medical service provider. And so this is also an advantage. All right. I'm just looking at my further notes. In terms of method, what are the methods of research would the author use to supplement or complement the methods that he has applied in the PhD? So this is my last point. So despite all these points that I have raised, overall, the dissertation that has been presented, formation of a mechanism for increasing the competitiveness of private medical clinics in the context of reforming the healthcare system in Russia, deserves the award of the degree of candidate of science in economics, and it meets the qualification requirements for candidate dissertation in scientific specialty 5.2.6 management. Thank you for your attention.
Professor Marinova, thank you very much. Спасибо большое.
Professor Marinova, thank you very much for your report. Now I would like to read out my own report. This is the report of the chairperson. We have talked extensively about the practical application of the dissertation. We talked about the importance of developing healthcare in Russia. However, the dissertation is also useful for scientific community. The academic degree seeker provide a systematic analysis of theoretical foundations. He tried to answer all the questions that he posed. The dissertation makes an important contribution to scientific discourse, and there are few works that deal with competitiveness in healthcare system. Therefore, I suppose that the dissertation has a theoretical significance. I would like to say that the author should be given merit for his analysis, including empirical analysis. However, I have a few questions. These are debatable issues. However, I would like you to comment on these issues. So the dissertation deals with the increasing of competitiveness of private medical clinics. However, you do not provide enough rationale for the relevance of the topic in terms of its theoretical significance. What's the research problem? Is there an academic debate which shows that there's a need for further research of this topic? The author also explains why the topic is relevant from the practical point of view. However, I would like which academic discussion you drew upon when you chose the topic for the dissertation. The next question was about the theories and concepts. I think some of them require further clarification. So what dynamic capabilities are specific for healthcare institutions? In table 1.2, you present different components of competitiveness. However, these components also refer to companies working in other industries. So are these factors specific for healthcare? The purpose of the dissertation is to develop theoretical and methodological approaches to the formation of the mechanism of increasing competitiveness in healthcare, in private healthcare system. Please clarify what you mean by the theoretical approach and what's the theoretical novelty of the dissertation. The author also analyzes competitive strategies of private clinics under challenging conditions. This allowed you to identify the specificity in competitiveness of different multi-specialty clinics. How did you use the research findings when you developed methods of assessment of competitiveness? The author also states that the author developed a method of assessing competitiveness of private medical clinics, and he also developed a mechanism. So what do you mean when you say a method or a mechanism? The dissertation does not provide a clear explanation of what you mean by these terms. On page 141 you write about the methods. However, over there you provide a formula, so it's the same as the method. Increasing competitiveness requires the solution of some management issues. Moreover, we shouldn't forget about human resources. The author unfortunately does not write about this issue. And my last comment is as follows. You do not write anything about the possibility to use your method for state medical clinics. An increasing number of state-run clinics are using modern management strategies. Therefore, I suppose the guidelines in the dissertation could be used by state-run clinics as well. The critical remarks do not change the overall positive assessment of the dissertation, and the dissertation by Eduard Oparin is a complete research work. So I suppose that the dissertation by Eduard Oparin complies with the major requirements set forth in the relevant order of St. Petersburg State University on the procedure of granting academic degrees at St. Petersburg State University, and Eduard Oparin can be awarded the academic degree of the candidate of economic sciences, scientific specialty 526 management. Now please answer the questions.
Dissertation Assembly, thank you very much for your feedbacks, and thank you very much for your questions. Really, these questions, I think, that made the very rich contribution to the dissertation work in the whole, and preparing the answers and understanding the answers to these questions, I think, enriched a lot. I have just an organizational question. How would we proceed to answer question by question all questions or not? Because we have a lot of questions, and maybe we will not be able to answer all of them within these 40 minutes. What do you propose?
Это на ваше усмотрение.
It's up to you. You can combine some questions. I suppose that some members of the Dissertation Council have asked similar questions, so you can combine some questions in one and provide your answer. So it's up to you. I suggest that you answer all the questions, but please combine the questions if they are similar.
I will try to do my best. Should I continue in English?
Как вам удобнее. It's up to you. You can speak English or you can Russian.
No. What is it required? I can in English. I can be Russian. Хорошо.
Да, давайте на русском. У нас есть официально один англоязычный член нашего диссертационного совета. У нас есть перевод, поэтому я думаю, что мы справимся, если вы будете комментировать вопросы на русском. Спасибо.
Svetla, sorry for my Russian, but I will continue in Russian.
Ну, все хорошо.
I would like to ask with the questions posed by Professor Akulin. The first question was about the possibility for private medical institutions to compete with state medical institutions within the framework of the compulsory medical insurance or public-private partnership. I would like to give you a brief account. I think this competition is possible. However, we need some specific conditions which are governed by the following things. We should increase the tariffs for the services. So I suppose it's a very important condition. We should increase the tariffs. Another important condition is the fact that the distribution of quotas is not transparent. So administrative resources used to distribute the quotas for medical care. And there are examples showing this. For example, it refers to IVF. It was used for several years, and it allowed us to give a momentum to this area. And number 3, I suppose that the territorial mandatory medical insurance, compulsory medical insurance system is not effective. If it is more effective, then it will be possible for private clinics to compete. I think we should expand their involvement in the system of federal quotas. And I believe that very few medical companies can participate in the market. 60% of them, or even more, do not have this opportunity. The next condition is consolidation. At present, medical clinics are very small. The top 10 large medical networks now occupy 20% of the Russian market. So consolidation is really necessary here. It will allow medical clinics to gain momentum. The next question was about priority areas. When it comes to public contract. Well, it is defined by compulsory healthcare insurance tariffs and by the absence of the investment component. So if tariffs are feasible in terms of operating costs, then they can participate in the system. So I suppose that this is a very interesting issue. However, it caters only for 20 or 30% of the revenue. But I would like to focus. You have to recoup operating costs. Here I'm talking about such areas as MRI diagnostics, hemodialysis, this is an important area. PCR testing can also be used. Cardiac heart surgery and cardiology. So I suppose that this will allow the medical clinics to recoup the operating costs. There are very few private medical clinics that can get federal quotas. They account only for about 5% of private medical clinics. The next question was about competition in the public health system without private healthcare system. Thank you, that's a very interesting question. Do we need private medical care in general if state hospitals can compete with each other? Well, I would like to say that state-run hospitals should compete with each other. They compete for resources, including investment resources. They compete for qualified personnel. And here there's a competition among state-run hospitals and private medical providers. And there's also a competition for patients. State-run healthcare is underfunded. Therefore, it's very difficult to provide the services without providing paid medical services. How is it possible to do without private medical care? So private clinics account for 60% of the market when it comes to outpatient treatment. So I suppose that it's impossible to do without them. When it comes to inpatient treatment, I would like to say that private clinics account for only 5%, and in this market share, it is possible to do without private medical clinics. The same refers to ambulance, emergency medical care. Private emergency medical care accounts only for 7% of the market. The next question was about the recommendations, about the use of my guidelines for public medical institutions. There's one limitation here. It is connected with the next thing. A revenue and its growth results from the increased competitiveness. And in state-run hospitals, increased revenue doesn't always result from increased competition. It is mostly connected with higher funding and a large number of quotas. So I suppose that 2 out of 4 indicators cannot be applied to state-run clinics. The other 2 indicators are personnel assessment and areas and range of services are published on the official websites, and they can be used in order to assess different clinics. However, I would say it's impossible to use the method on the whole. I believe that the current system of paid services to be adequate and in line with the interests of the citizens of the Russian Federation? No, I don't think so. It is not in line with the interests. It's a forced measure connected with the fact that public health is underfunded in Russia. Funding of public health care accounts only for 3% of the GDP. Our famous Dr. Rashal used to say that the state should invest at least 5% of the GDP into healthcare. So state healthcare clinics generate 50% of their revenue, even more than 50% of their revenue, due to paid medical services. However, paid medical services in state-run hospitals are lower than medical services provided by private medical clinics. So I suppose it really increases the accessibility of medical services. Well, but in general, the system is not adequate. Paid medical services provided by state-run clinics are provided free of charge, and sometimes patients have to pay out of pocket for the same service, and I think this is not the right practice. It is one thing when you pay for more comfort, for extra food, or for some additional service, then it is possible to have such paid medical hospitals in state-run hospitals. The practical significance of my dissertation. I worked in some clinics. However, the method doesn't require my work in a specific clinic. The method is designed to help experts which forecast the market development. It is designed to help experts that want to identify the market dynamics. Revenue is not the only indicator that is important. Large private medical providers look further than just revenue, and I believe that these guidelines, these assessment methods are important for them. Moreover, the forecast is also important, whether this clinic is going to continue to be the leader or whether the medical provider can catch up with the competitors. So the method allows us to assess the potential to make a forecast. So the method is important for top clinics. Middle-sized and smaller clinics are interested in financial indicators, in operational efficiency, and so on, and they do not share this information. And the next question was about my forecast. Well, I am satisfied with your answers. Thank you. I would like to provide answers to questions asked by Professor Dimitriardi. Thank you very much for your report. You asked me about the terms, the use of the terms in my dissertation. I suppose I could talk at length about the use of the terms, but I will try to be brief here. The first question is about personalized healthcare and personal healthcare. So, in my opinion, healthcare is divided into personal. Personal healthcare focuses on the individual, and there's also public healthcare, which is aimed at society in general. It includes monitoring public health, different employment, types of employment healthcare, health inspection services, public healthcare focuses on public in general. Healthcare is becoming more and more focused on taking into account the specific features of a patient, such as genetic characteristics or physiological characteristics, and treatment is often driven by these specific characteristics. And this involves personalized medicine. This is where personalized approach comes in. It's difficult to say which one is correct. I suppose that your comment is valid. I suppose that in the future we see a more personalized healthcare. And where's this fine line between personalized healthcare and personal healthcare? But right now there is no fine line here. We know that there is personal healthcare, which can be called personalized healthcare. So I would agree with you that we can say that it's personalized healthcare. You also asked about competition factors and characteristics of the competitive environment. You don't like the term competition factors. You have an extensive experience in this area, I suppose. I have less experience. We can talk at length about this issue. How we could say that the characteristics of the competitive environment are the competitive factors which allow us to overcome the barriers. And so probably competition factors and characteristics of the environment, of the competitive environment, are the same. Competitive factors can be characteristics in a sense. So it's difficult to see a dividing line between these terms. Thank you very much. We can continue the discussion for a long time, so thank you for answering my questions. I would like to thank Professor Rogova, and thank you for your interesting questions. I will try to answer your questions. This first question was about extra instruments that allow us to assess the competitiveness of the clinic. I would like to say that the BCS tool is not used by every clinic. Some clinics use financial indicators and a very limited amount of qualitative indicators. Some clinics work on a different level, on a higher level, and they use financial indicators as well as other indicators, different types of KPI. They assess personnel, they assess efficiency, well, this is the main parameters that they assess apart from financial indicators. However, I would like to say that I agree with you. There are other instruments. The DEA model is also widely used. It is well known in this country as well. However, I would like to say that this instrument is effective for assessing inpatient hospitals, for assessing state-run hospitals. And I'm pretty sure that they use this model. When it comes to private healthcare, it has very few inpatient hospitals, less than 10, I suppose. And as far as I know, they do not use this instrument for analysis. It's a very good tool for inpatient hospitals. You also asked me about the BCS tool, and I believe that market leaders use BCS tool, and I suppose they will probably use the DEA model in the future. The next question was about the way I came to the conclusion, how I identified the key factors. I do not provide an algorithm in my dissertation. At the same time, I would like to provide a clarification here. That's the result of several aspects. I describe several methods in my dissertation. One of them is Stefan Papai Dobrin. The other one is written by Tatiana Siburina. There was a method developed by Pavlova. The dissertation also describes the analysis of strategies, which is used by private medical providers. And the dissertation gives a list of the most successful strategies. Finally, the dissertation gives survey findings. The survey was conducted among top private medical providers. I also have professional experience in healthcare. So according to my approach, competition consists of several interconnected elements, such as resources, processes, technologies, and the overall competitive environment are generalized and synthesized different elements. And as a result, I developed a mechanism which consisted of 31 most important elements of competitiveness. I grouped them into 9 blocks, which are called sources of competitiveness, and then I grouped them into 4 major stages. When a new clinic is opened, they should be implemented in stages. You also asked me about the differences between different strategies. You asked me about the strategy of forming business groups and the strategies of mergers and acquisitions. I would agree that mergers and acquisitions are used to form business groups. However, there are 2 types of business groups. One type of business group is connected with medical activities such as pharmaceuticals, medical devices, and so on. And the second type of business group includes healthcare. As an example, I can give you the group Mother and Child. It has a chain of clinics, and also it develops areas of business which are relevant to healthcare. So it's clinic plus additional business activities. And the second type of business means that a legal entity decides to start a private clinic, and we have examples of such clinics and of such business groups. For example, Metsi clinic was bought by such a business group. So we can describe it as clinic plus business activities not connected with healthcare. And mergers and acquisitions, there's only one formula, clinic plus clinic. So there are 3 types of business groups that I have talked about. Now the next question was about the fact that increasing competitiveness requires investment. I didn't write about it in my dissertation. Private medical providers realize that any investment must be returned. No private medical provider will make investment without possible return of investment. However, there are limitations here. When they make a decision about investment in competitiveness, they realized that the investment must be returned. If a manager is a capable one, then they will invest only if the investment is returned. So the approach is as follows: increasing competitiveness costs money, and not many are ready to invest in long-term competitiveness. Such providers need resources as well as specific management skills. It's quite a rare combination, and therefore it's quite a challenge for private medical clinics. And I believe that the owners and the shareholders usually make decisions about investment in the long-term competition. And the manager should always understand that any decision to invest in the long-term competitiveness should be feasible. I'm really sorry. In my dissertation, I write that sources of competitiveness are grouped into several stages. However, the implementation can be done in stages or simultaneously. Everything depends on whether it's a project which is implemented within the company, whether it's the single project in the company, or whether it's one of the many projects in the company. Usually the resources are limited, and there is no qualified personnel at the outset. And at the first stage, there is an owner who has some financial capabilities, and they need to involve medical personnel in order to continue implementing the project. If it's a chain of clinics, then they have medical personnel. Therefore, the second stage can be done differently. For example, they can start buying equipment earlier. The third stage includes such processes as IT infrastructure. It can also start earlier if the clinic already has these resources. If the company has an office with marketing capabilities, then they can develop the strategy earlier. However, sometimes marketing strategies changed as the project develops. The concept changes and different limitations occur. The format of the clinic might change, the number of doctors' offices might change. There could be some financial constraints. So sometimes the management takes appropriate decisions on the run. Thank you very much. Is it okay if we exceed the time period? Please provide a more general answers to the questions and keep to the topic. You haven't answered all the questions. You asked me about marketing. The method I use in my dissertation includes the most important elements. I know it wasn't a good idea to focus on marketing as a commercial promotion. Actually, what I mean in my dissertation is additional sources of competitiveness. Any medical clinic has specific type of marketing. The vector is from the clinic to the patient. There's also internal vector, internal marketing, and there's also marketing. There's also relationship marketing. So I suppose I should have written about it in my dissertation. I wanted to focus on additional things, and sometimes clinics do not take them into account. They should expand services they provide. Sometimes they underestimate digital marketing. This is a new element, and we shouldn't forget about customer relations management as well. So these are three components which are included. You were also asking me about public-private partnerships. There are 4 types of public-private partnerships. According to the law on public-private partnerships, there's only one, concession, and there are different types of concession. When it comes to healthcare, it's not concession per se. It's different types of cooperation with the state. And there are different types of cooperation between private healthcare and state. The first one is concession, outsourcing, cooperation, joint venture, and the fourth type is cooperation within the framework of compulsory medical insurance. Why does it mention hemodialysis? Well, that's quite a rare thing, and this project is quite well known. There are also other alternative projects. For example, this January saw a very interesting project. Mother and child opened a clinic in St. Petersburg in cooperation with the state. It was used for 2 years as anti-COVID hospital, and then it was given to mother and child group. You asked me about the mechanism of increasing competitiveness in the state sector. My answer would be yes. There are 9 elements, and 6 of them can be used in state-run clinics. Development of infrastructure, integration in the national healthcare system, and regional expansion. So these elements cannot be used in state-run hospitals. Thank you very much. I'm satisfied with your answers. Please answer to my report and Professor Marinova's report. Please keep within the time limits.
For your answers, for your feedback and for your questions. You have very fundamental questions, and I think that let's start from the first one, where you indicate it's really fundamental. What does it mean, healthcare? And what does it mean, medical service? Is it public or private, and what is the consequences? I already told that all the healthcare can be split in public and private, but in terms of healthcare, I would start from the definitions, which is clearly stated in the World Health Organization first, where it's clearly stated that health services, that any service for which improve the health of the or improves the health of the pupil. Then it includes the medical services, and according to our federal law, the medical services, and as well as in the world also, it's specific is that this is any intervention or complex of interventions aimed to the people, aimed at prevention, diagnostic, and treatment of diseases. So it means that the medical services has direct impact on the health of the person and for the society as well. And therefore, this cannot be purely private. This is for sure public good. In general, because the results of this intervention is influenced the society as a whole. Then if you're talking about the private, yes, it could be the private good, but in some specific cases, for example, cosmetology. Part of cosmetology, this is just a private decision of the person to go to the clinic. In this case, this is personal good. As a result of that, as it is public good, for sure the state should regulate all the activities related to the qualification of medical personnel and the quality standards, for sure. and the state is usually does this. On top of that, the state, in some certain way, some certain proportion, finance the infrastructure of the total medical care, and finance the operating the major part of the institutions. What the privates can do, private clinics, only the latest two parts, partly finance and partly operate. And the key point here is that in which scale the private medicine can be developed. It's totally decided through the regulation by the state. So therefore, this is the results of the effectiveness of the private medicine from this logic is much more influenced by the decision on the state level and by the government. The next important point was related to the services. What does it mean, healthcare, in terms of services? And what influence the value creation? What does it mean co-creation of value? And in the work, I have noticed that the value creation is a very important factor. And it means that, what does it mean value creation or co-creation with the patient? It means that the patient participate in the results. The medical service has a specific, when the results depends not only for the medical provider and the doctor, but the results also depends on the patient. And in which stage the patient will be involved and motivated to complete and fulfill the recommendation of doctor will actually give the result. And this is exactly the value co-creation process. Then if you're going about the services, yes, services in terms of differentiation, this is significant and probably the most important part of the private clinics here in Russia. But on top of that, those clinics who can afford innovate and implement innovative things, this is also the part of the differentiation. As I told, that so few companies can do that. Fortunately, I know some and work in the company which can do this. Therefore, the service and innovation, this is two key importance. Then relating to the service dominant logic, in terms of involving the patient, I told that yes, this is exactly important point, because it influences on the result. But this logic also is saying about the opportunity to transform the business model, where the patient is paying not for the result of the treatment, but the patient is paying for not to be ill. So this is a very important and interesting, I would say, concept, which already discussed several times, and I participate in the discussion. But if to conclude very shortly, this concept today in Russia cannot be deployed without the state, because this changes the habits of the patients to go to the doctor before he is ill. In Soviet Union, we had very developed this system of prophylactica. Now it's mostly stopped. But to recover this idea of CDL is purely, for me, it's that concept which was already deployed in Soviet Union, but without the state, it's very difficult to deploy. I know some examples, but no results, because it relates to the common market of the and that requires a lot of investments. So maybe I would comment on the PPP, something what from my point of view is applicable here in the most way in Russia, comparing to different countries. PPP project, as I told, they have some specific for healthcare in Russia. We have generally 4 types, but all of them, the major of them, they consider that the state provides some part of the infrastructure, or it is a land, or it is a clinic, or it is a building, and the private operator takes responsibility to invest into the equipment, to invest into restructuring if necessary, and operate this asset within certain number of years. Usually it's 10 plus, but the problem here is that the state now doesn't guarantee the revenue from the state in terms of quotas or compulsory health insurance. They just may sign the contract, but no guarantees. And therefore, therefore, in general, this PPP project in Russia, they considered to be risky. And if you don't have a very good GR resource, so you have very, very high risk. I personally participated in two of these projects, and both of them were successful just because it was in the local level, has very good GR resource with the president of Tatarstan. So therefore they were successful. In general, we have very few of them. So. Svetla, probably you could remind me what additional questions you have, or I would have to clarify in my response for these questions.
I think I'm satisfied with the response to the questions, the core questions, and indeed it is very important, the nature of the service, because it affects not only the decision making, but also the choice and also the positioning. And you rightly said that mother and child and ophthalmology, I think it was the other one, and sort of beauty surgery, these were the most successful private clinics because they were really with a strategy of focus differentiation. So it is very interesting. This point is extremely important. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I'm satisfied.
Okay, thank you very much. So I can continue with the next. Okay, thank you. Марина Олеговна, теперь ваши вопросы. Также благодарю вас за...
Thank you very much for your report. I would like to be brief. You asked me about the academic discussion. So healthcare has its specificity. Private medical healthcare is a sort of para-academic topic. However, there is a discussion about the role of private medical care on the Russian market. The first opinion is that state medicine, state healthcare is very well developed. It has enough investment and it has tradition, so we do not need private medical care. We do not need it. However, there's another point of view which says that state healthcare cannot cope with all the tasks as it is underfunded. And under these conditions, private medical care plays an important role. And private healthcare has to compete and to think about its efficiency, which of course has an impact on the state sector. However, in some areas, it is possible for state healthcare to work on its own without private healthcare. You asked me about also dynamic capabilities. So dynamic capabilities lead to changes and innovations. So in general, dynamic capabilities can be used in any industry. However, healthcare is divided into private and state and public, and therefore dynamic capabilities can be used differently in public and private health care. When it comes to innovations, the chief medical officer in a state clinic cannot make investment decisions. However, the situation is different in private clinics. So the implementation of innovations is faster in private clinics. Moreover, any investment in innovation and any innovation requires scientific research. So when it comes to better services or new services, it requires quite a lot of time. So what's the difference between the mechanism in healthcare and in other industries? I suppose that other industries are not to be integrated into state healthcare. However, private healthcare is to be integrated into state healthcare. Moreover, the entrance barriers are higher for healthcare. It's very expensive to start a medical business. A small clinic costs quite a lot of money, about 100 million rubles. Moreover, opening a clinic requires a one-time investment, or rather investment which should be done not in stages, not in installments, but instantaneously. You also asked me about my research findings. The mechanism included two elements: the necessity to implement in the national healthcare system that is the main research finding. And I included in the 9 elements which I write about in my dissertation. There's also an interesting question. You ask about method or methodology and mechanism. In my work, I talk about the methodology, and I give a formula and describe how to use it. But the formula is the 5th stage, and you need the other 4 stages, 4 steps before you use the formula. So this is the steps that you are supposed to undertake before using the formula. You have to identify different data in order to use the formula. You need specific numbers, you need to calculate specific numbers, whether it's personnel or number of services provided and so on. It's also necessary to identify the market players and the comparison foundation. So methodology is wider than just the formula. You need 4 other steps before you can use the formula. There's also another interesting question. To what extent can this mechanism be used for state clinics? I believe I have answered this question. Thank you. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, dear members of the Dissertation Council, is everybody satisfied with the answers provided by Eduard Oparin? Yes, we are satisfied. Thank you very much. Does anybody want to ask questions? I suppose there's no one who would like to ask a question or make a comment. Now I give the floor to the academic degree or research advisor, Professor Panibratov. Please tell us about the research advisor and his work. Professor Oparin, I'm supposed to talk about his personality. I'm supposed to talk about Eduard Oparin's personality. I would like to say that I am really amazed by his persistence and by the fact that he did his best to produce a high-quality material. This is the first time that I have met a person who is working in business, but who is also interested in scientific research and in self-development. I am pretty sure that all members of the Dissertation Council see that the academic degree seeker was very meticulous in answering the questions. He was trying to spread his enthusiasm, and this is one of those rare cases when the academic degree seeker is really has shown really superb results. I'm really amazed by his preparation. He has prepared the text of the dissertation, and I'm really happy with the defense itself. I can talk for a long time, so I suppose that would be all. Thank you. Have we received any questions by email? No questions. Dear members of the Dissertation Council, does anybody want to say something? Do you want to make comments? Now I would like to ask the members of the Dissertation Council if they have any questions or comments about the remote procedure. Please answer everybody. No? I don't have any questions. I don't have any questions or comments. I don't have any questions or comments either.
I don't have any questions or comments apart from saying thank you for the interesting piece of work.
Thank you. Эдуард Валерьевич, пожалуйста, есть ли у вас комментарии, вопросы?
Mr. Oparin, do you have any questions or comments about the procedure? No, I don't. Now let us move on to the next item on the agenda. Dear colleagues, we have a chance to have a technical break to discuss the results of the defense. Do you think we need such a break, or do you think we can start with the voting? No, we don't. No, no. We can start the voting procedure. Now let us continue with the agenda. I will be asking each member of the Dissertation Council their opinion. It's 4:25 Moscow time. We're beginning the open voting on the issue of conferring the academic degree of the candidate of academic sciences or of economic sciences, scientific specialty 5-6 management. It is emphasized that by voting in favor, each member of the Dissertation Council states that item 11 of the order has not been violated. Here I quote: "The academic degree seeker shall make references to the sources that have been used to write the dissertation. If the academic degree seeker used the research findings obtained by the degree seeker themselves or in collaboration, the academic degree seeker shall point this out. Let me remind you that the decision of the Dissertation Council on conferring the academic degree is positive, provided more than 50% of the Council members have voted in favor. Professor Akulin, what's your opinion? I vote in favor of conferring the academic degree of the candidate of economic sciences to Mr. Oparin. Professor Dimitriadi, what's your opinion? I'm in favor of conferring the academic degree of the candidate of economic sciences to Eduard Oparin. Professor Rogova, what's your opinion? I'm in favor of conferring the academic degree. Professor Sherishova, what's your opinion? I vote in favor of conferring the academic degree. Professor Marinova, what's your opinion?
I entirely support the award of the academic degree, кандидат экономических наук, management, to Eduard Oparin.
Спасибо большое.
I'm Professor Latulha. Also vote in favor of conferring the academic degree to Eduard Oparin. So, dear colleagues, 6 members of the Dissertation Council have voted in favor of conferring the academic degree. So, we confer the academic degree, the scientific specialty, 5-6 management. Now I give the floor to Eduard Oparin. Dear Chairperson, dear members of the Dissertation Council, I would like to thank you for your contribution. I would like to thank my research advisor. We started our collaboration more than 4 years ago, and I would like to thank him for his trust in me. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do research. I would like to thank him for his contribution and for sharing his fundamental approaches. I was happy to work with Andrei Yurievich. He has the theoretical background that was necessary for me in order to feel better in medical community. I would like to thank each of you. Thank you for recognizing that the topic of the dissertation is interesting and relevant. Thank you for your positive assessment of the dissertation. And thank you also for raising very interesting questions. Some questions require further consideration. This is really inspiring. Thank you for your reports. I hope I will continue my research. Thank you. Congratulations. We congratulate you on being awarded the academic degree. Dear colleagues, thank you very much. This is the end of the session. Please switch off the broadcast.